Tonight, as you can see from the opening slide, we're going to be talking about crime and the business community. Sometimes we call crime in the business community white-collar crime because a lot of folks in the business world wear white shirts. So I have worn a white shirt tonight so I can illustrate our discussion. So let's start with the first slide. Remember we had talked about the common law. Well, common law not only applied to economic difficulties that our legal system had from the time of the kings of England all the way up to where we are now, but it also involved criminal activities. Criminal activities take up 4 different types of sectors. The first one we call mala in se. That's a Latin word. A Latin word that means it is bad in and of itself. But mala in se goes beyond the fact that we call it bad in and of itself. It is a much stronger term than that. Mala in se refers to a crime which really shakes the individual's conscience and their spirit and their psyche. It is a crime. Murder, assault, rape, kidnapping. Anything which would reach down, grasp you as an individual, and make you feel not just uncomfortable, but make you feel as if you might not want to stay in that location where you are, or could even make you feel worse that you did not want to continue to live. That is a crime that is mala in se. The next one is mala prohibita. Mala prohibita is a crime which is bad because we say it is. Now, think of an example. What is a crime that is bad because we say it is? That's mala in se, is murder. There's a difference. But there's a difference. What do you think? What do you think mala prohibita would be? Robert? Yeah.
Using drugs.
Using drugs is bad because we say it is. It can also cross over the line into mala in se, couldn't it? Because it tends to affect people's lives. Jaywalking is a beautiful example. Traffic offenses are beautiful examples. Traffic offenses and jaywalking didn't exist in Old England. But they did kind of get their start there. Okay, so mala prohibita, we were talking about it having a being bad because we say it is, and perfect examples being something that, like traffic offenses or jaywalking. Now, I like jaywalking a lot. When did jaywalking start becoming an offense? You know? No, it wasn't that long ago. It was right about the time of the invention of the automobile, wasn't it? Because people who were walking across the street would just walk out across the street in front of these horseless carriages, and they could get hurt very badly because the new automobiles could not stop very quickly. And so they wanted to keep people from going out in front of them. Horses, as we know, would probably, if they saw a person, would slow down or stop. Automobiles have no mind of their own. Well, at least not yet. They're working on it. So mala in se is bad in and of itself. Okay? In and of itself. Mala prohibita is bad because we say it is. Now, what is the difference between a felony and a misdemeanor? These are two categories of crimes. So what is a felony and what makes it a felony? Anybody know? What makes something a felony? Break the law, yeah. Robert?
Something that's against the law of the entire country, like in all the states.
Like in all the states, maybe. Maybe a felony could be in all the states. What else might be? This is kind of a trick question. And it's not a felony because we say it is. It's a felony based on the time that an individual serves in jail. A felony is a crime for which the sentence is 365 days or longer. 365 days or longer. If it is 364 days or less, it is a misdemeanor. Okay? Okay. So, what is required for a crime to be committed and for criminal liability? There are two things that are required for a crime. Anybody want to take a guess at what the first one is? Somebody does something, an action. That is the prohibited act, or actus reus. So there are two things. First is the prohibited criminal act. The actus reus. The second one is a specified state of mind. It's called intent. How many times do you hear on TV shows about lawyers or about crime or police officers or detectives or anything like that? We have to know what the intent of the individual was. We have to think about that. That's the second part of the crime. Because if one of these two things is missing, if they didn't do something, and they didn't intend to do that thing, there's no crime. So let's take an example and we'll talk about that for a second. A prohibited act. Someone walking into a bank. How many of you have walked into a bank? We've all walked into a bank at one time or another, right? But I'm willing to bet that no hands will go up if I say, with the intent to rob that bank. Right? The intent to rob the bank is what makes it a crime. Just walking into the bank, you might be making a deposit. But if you walk into the bank with the intent to make an unauthorized withdrawal, then that would be a crime. Sometimes crimes include lesser offenses, and we'll talk about a couple of those. We'll use murder as an example. But there are other crimes which include lesser offenses. Okay? For example, assault and battery can include just plain assault or plain battery. What changes these particular crimes is the intent and how somebody performs those crimes. Let's proceed with that. So, the first thing we want to talk about is not only the level of crime, but also the transferred intent. When we talk about an action, the action is pretty direct and speaks for itself. But intent can occur in several different ways. This is how transferred intent works. As opposed to us intending to shoot, if I have a gun and I intend to shoot someone, all right? With me so far? I intend to shoot a certain person. Now that is the same so far as with transferred intent. Okay? So far. There's our target. There's our person. But I miss. I miss my intended target. The bullet goes around my target, or I miss. And it hits someone else beyond my intended target. What the law says is that my intent to shoot and kill this person is transferred to the innocent victim, which I even did not try and aim at. It's the same intent. Okay? So the law always assumes that any perpetrator intends to kill anyone in the vicinity with the same forethought or recklessness and a reckless disregard for human life as the original target. Back when I was yes, sir.
Let's just say, officer, you authorize, don't kill a person when you kill somebody else. How would they going to listen?
That intent would also transfer. If he was wrong to shoot the first person, then the second person would be the victim of that shooting. See, because people, even officers that are empowered by the law to keep the peace, make errors or do something deliberately. And when that happens, that intent can also transfer. And if it's malicious or reckless, there could be a manslaughter or an assault or with intent to do bodily harm or a crime that's allied to that. So it doesn't, if it's a civilian like you and I, that's no different for a police officer who's in uniform and wearing a badge. When I was in Columbus, Ohio, practicing law, there was an individual who was attempting to rob someone on the street. And the individual they were attempting to rob was not moving as quickly as the individual perpetrating the robbery thought they should. And so, what happened? What happened was that the individual had a gun. The perpetrator pulled the trigger. It was not a very good pistol. And there are some pistols that are out there which have this reputation that they will not go where they're aimed. Particularly 22 calibers. The round went around the person they were trying to rob and vanished. Where'd it go? It went 2 blocks down the street and killed a teenager. Well, that's 2 blocks. The transferred intent went from the individual that was right in front of the perpetrator to that individual who was down the street. And the perpetrator, even though he did not successfully rob the individual in front of him, and did not successfully wound, maim, or kill the individual in front of him, was arrested for the murder of the teenager down the street. He was convicted, and he was imprisoned for life without parole. I talked a little bit for a moment about lesser included offenses. Lesser included offenses start with the highest possible offense and work their way down from felonies to misdemeanors. The one we have here, the top one, of course, and we're going to talk about murder, murder involving death, murder involving wounding, murder involving maiming. The top one is death. The intent is to kill. The 2 top ones are aggravated murder and murder. Now, what's the difference between aggravated murder and murder? Does anyone know? Some places they call them first degree and second degree. Go ahead, give it a guess.
First degree is like it's planned out and you know they want to kill, right?
Excellent. Premeditation.
Yeah. And second degree is they kill them, but kind of like accidental almost. Is that?
Well, no, they want to kill them, but they don't take time to plan it. I mean, that sounds kind of strange, but there are, premeditation means that they have planned it over a couple of hours, a couple of days, a couple of weeks. And in fact, there's one instance, there was an individual who killed his neighbor. And the individual was made angry by his neighbor, didn't kill him right away, but went in the house, got a knife, came out, and then killed him. It only took 2 or 3 minutes to do that. But that was enough for the court to rule that they had time to think about it and decide yes or no, I'm going to do this or not. That was premeditation, so that was an excellent answer. What's the difference then between premeditation or first degree and unpremeditated or second degree murder? Yeah.
It's like you didn't plan on doing it, like if you walk in like your spouse cheating and like lose control.
Okay, well, in some states that's correct. In some states that's correct. In other states it goes down to the next one down.
Manslaughter?
Manslaughter.
I thought manslaughter is like accidental. Like I know my aunt got killed by car accident under a guy who was under the influence. So they gave him manslaughter because he was under the influence.
We'll talk about something like that here as we go down the scale. Jillian, you were going to say something.
I would say, because it has something to do, I guess, more so like when it's accidental, like you still kill somebody, but you still have to kind of stand by your word. I don't know, like maybe you do it with car, so like it's accidental, but at the same time, you maybe have no time to stop.
Okay, these are all good answers.
Doesn't it have anything to do with how it was done though?
Ah.
That's the way you do the manslaughter. How it was
the way it's done, not the fact that it's done. Most of these are different because this one often involves a firearm or a knife or a object which can bludgeon the individual. And this one does not necessarily come from using a handheld weapon like poison. But poison can also be premeditated depending on how long it takes the poison to work and how much dosage is being given over how long a time.
And what is wouldn't it be premeditated?
Okay? Everybody's using the example of somebody walking in on their spouse and not knowing why they're with, who they're with. So you in this case, our perpetrator replaces the sugar for the coffee with insecticide or strychnine, which is the same color as sugar, right? So that would be, it would be with a weapon, but that's kind of like, whoa, I'm going to do this right now kind of thing. But it takes a while for it to work, yeah. Self-defense? No, self-defense is self-defense. We'll talk about that. Stand your ground? We'll talk about that too.
I got a question. So I think I read somewhere that the dude went to jail because he shot himself.
He shot himself?
So like, yeah.
You mean he was convicted of being stupid?
I'm just saying he was in jail because he shot himself.
He shot himself. Now, did he intend to shoot himself? Was this attempted suicide?
I don't know.
In some states, attempting suicide is a crime. It is a felony. Well, that is if it's unsuccessful suicide. It's just the way that it is sometimes. See, I told you this was going to be an interesting section. Jumping off a bridge? Yeah? Some jumping off a bridge and injuring yourself. But go back to the guy that shot himself. I think that was more a conviction of the fact that when he shot himself, he could have recklessly endangered someone else.
And also the gun cannot be a registered firearm too, so I'll remember for that as well.
It can be registered or unregistered. It just depends. Yeah. So, aggravated murder and murder, the difference is often the way it is done and the amount of time that it takes between the two. Yes, Sheree?
So if I just push somebody off of a cliff or something, that would be murder?
It could be if the person is injured badly enough to die. There was, now Sheree is talking from something she saw, did you see on Facebook? Or on Twitter? Or on something where this young lady was on a bridge, and the bridge was 60 feet above this river gorge, and a friend of hers shoved her into the water. She has, the young lady that went into the water that was pushed, was more mad about it than she was injured. She was bruised a little bit, had some soft tissue injuries, but she did not die. She was not badly hurt. They charged the woman who pushed her friend. She needs to pick her friends more carefully. With reckless endangerment. Again, here we go with recklessness. Recklessness. And that would be a lesser, that could even be a misdemeanor. It's so much lesser. Because it was just something that just happened all of a sudden, and she didn't think about it, and she said, oh, she's not going to jump, boom! And off she went. Go ahead.
If I'm the CEO of a company, and let's say I like design cars or whatever, and I know that the airbags are faulty and someone could die, and if people die and they find out that I knew that, would that be premeditated?
There could be, There could be some charges preferred there, but it would take a lot of complex and complicated investigation. At the very minimum, there would be a fraud charge in there because he knew there was something wrong about it and he didn't do anything about it. He just let it go. Yeah, go ahead, Jillian.
So is there a difference between how misdemeanors and felonies, like which ones can get off your record?
How many you can get off your record?
Not how many, but like the difference of like, I don't know, you know how some people say like misdemeanors can come off your record after a while, but like felonies don't, something like that.
Depends on the state. There's a thing called expungement. And the first time that a individual commits a felony, and usually felonies are in degrees. Murder and aggravated murder are in what we call a Class A category. Class A categories will never be expunged. You have Class D and Class E felonies. They're all the way down here, just right above misdemeanors. Those can be expunged after a year. It takes a petition to the court, written by a lawyer, to expunge those from a person's record. Once that's done, they never existed. They simply never existed. They cannot be a serious felony, however. Go ahead.
I just have a question. Did these notes from this book?
They're going to be on Canvas, yes. I have not put them up yet, but I will put them up first thing in the morning,
Okay.
depending on how far we get through them.
Or is it in the book? Right.
Okay.
Is it in the book?
No, these are not in the book.
Okay.
This is all the stuff that I've put together.
Okay.
Okay? So, there's another difference, too, between aggravated and murder. We call aggravated murder a crime with death penalty specifications, or with specifications. Does anybody know what that means? That means they were committed under certain special circumstances. A crime that would not be murder automatically becomes aggravated murder if an individual kills someone while they are committing another crime. That's what we call a specification.
So like robbery? Going wrong?
Yes, if a robbery goes bad and somebody shoots somebody and they die, yes,
Aggravated.
that would be aggravated murder. Okay, that's very good. You picked this up real quick.
I like snap. I like snap.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So aggravated murder is things like commission of another crime, and they have to be specially set out in the law. Specially set out in the law. Oftentimes, the murder of a police officer, also, under any circumstances, not just the commission of a crime, is also a specification crime, which takes it from murder to aggravated murder. Same thing happens with manslaughter and aggravated manslaughter. Now, manslaughter, as a category, is where someone is the victim of an assault or the victim of a crime like arson or something else, and they die maybe more than a year later as a result of their injuries, if the injuries can be traced right back to that crime. So if someone wounds or maims someone and they live for a year with their injuries, but die a year later or more because of those injuries, then it is aggravated manslaughter because it's more than a year. What happens if it's less than a year and they die? It's murder. It gets pushed back up here because they died and it was less than a year. If they die and it's more than a year, it falls into the manslaughter category. aggravated manslaughter, just like aggravated murder, is often effected with some sort of a tool. Yes?
Is that as serious, like, as it'll come down to, like, the days, like 360 or what?
It is specified in law how many days that it is for someone to survive before the charge is reduced from one to the other, or bumped up from one to the other. Yes. Yes. Aggravated means it was under similar circumstances or specifications to aggravated murder. Similar types of actions or specifications. Generally, it was perpetrated with a tool of some sort. We're talking about knife, gun, bludgeon item, baseball bat, whatever. Okay? Manslaughter results more from reckless or inattentive action on the part of the person. This is why we have vehicular manslaughter, sometimes called reckless vehicular homicide in some states. It is because someone is either unable or unwilling to pay attention to what is going on. Someone who is intoxicated does not have the ability to pay attention to what they're doing. They don't have the ability to stop. They don't have the ability to guide that 2-ton missile they're driving into a safer location. That becomes vehicular homicide. So we have manslaughter, and that is reckless. Well, why, if we're using a vehicle like a car, why wouldn't it be aggravated manslaughter?
That's what I was doing. Because the
You said it was unintended.
Because it is unintended.
Like, you like, were planning to hit someone who like drove the car into it?
Mm-hmm.
Is it aggravated manslaughter?
That would elevate up into the murder classification. It's manslaughter because the person really doesn't know what they're doing. That's what, it's accidental, it's reckless. Though the classic case that arose about 10 years ago, and it's horrible to think about, is a farm worker was working in the field and he's gathering hay, and they had the hay baled up in the field, and he decided that he was just so tired he couldn't make it home, and he crawled on top of the hay bale and went to sleep. And that, at some point during the night, somebody came along, thought they were being funny, and set the hay bale on fire, and then he died from the fire. That was manslaughter. And the people, they didn't know. They thought they were playing a trick on somebody, but it was mindless and thoughtless, wasn't it? It was at the very least destruction of private property, which would be a misdemeanor. But since there was a human being involved and he was killed, it became manslaughter because he died. It was a reckless act. So we come down here to assault, and we have aggravated assault. Well, the person's going to live with aggravated assault. But what's the difference between aggravated assault and assault? You might be able to pick up on some of this now. What would be an aggravated assault? Sheree can't take any more of my lectures, and she picks up her phone and throws it at my head and kills me. Or hurts me. And they act out of behavior with a weapon of some sort. And the weapon can be the strangest things you've ever seen in your life. And there was one I heard of recently where it was assault. They charged someone with assault for a deadly tennis ball. Because tennis balls are not soft, they're kind of, they can really do some damage. And somebody got mad at somebody else and really smacked their tennis ball with the racket, drove it into somebody, and really hurt them. Well, that was aggravated assault because it was done with the racket and the tennis ball. Okay? I guess they weren't close enough to use the racket by itself. Yeah.
I have a question. What about if you drop a gun and you kill someone?
Oh man, that can be because that's reckless, and because it's a homicide, and because you knew or should have known. Here's another thing: you knew or should have known that the consequences of carrying that firearm were that it could discharge and injure someone. It's either aggravated manslaughter, or if you knew and it was reckless, it could jump up into the murder category. Yeah?
How long, like, do people serve typically for aggravated manslaughter?
For aggravated manslaughter, typically, under most law, it's at least 7 years. 7 to 10. Depending on how serious the judge feels it was, and what the sentencing guidelines. Here's something that we'll talk about later. There is a thing called sentencing guidelines. It's a book, and the book has been written by the legislature, and it goes through everything that's going on with certain crimes. And it's been written by a lot of lawyers who've been through a lot of stuff. And it tells a judge under what circumstances he needs to assign certain penalties. So if it's manslaughter, it's 7 years. Aggravated manslaughter, maybe it'll say 10 years, depending on the kind of tool that was used to commit the aggravated manslaughter and how the whole thing went down. Aggravated assault typically is about 3 years if it's done with a tool. So that becomes assault with a reckless tennis racket.
3 years.
It could be 3 years, depending on what the sentencing guidelines say. Okay? And assault generally is pushing, shoving, striking with the fist, and that sort of thing. And that can be anywhere from a misdemeanor assault up to maybe a year and a half. Yeah?
What about simple assault? That's the same thing as regular assault?
Simple assault is the same thing as just assault. Yeah.
It's a felony, right?
It is. It can be a felony, depending on whether or not they serve a year or more. Yeah.
So when they get murders for like, even like, I know I was watching a show, it's like one count, the first degree, another count, 7 degrees. It's like, because they kill multiple people. Is that why they get?
No. Here's what happens. They probably only killed one person. But to make for all these different things, and the prosecutor wants to make sure that they are going to be held accountable for something, even if it's assault with a deadly noodle. You ever seen what a noodle will do to the side of a refrigerator? It sticks. It suffocates someone with a noodle. That's another dad joke. Yeah, so what happens is that depending on what the level of the crime that has been committed and what the prosecutor wants to do with it, he's going to do what we call a kitchen sink prosecution, which means he's going to throw every single charge at every single level that that individual could possibly have committed, all the way from the top one that they committed down to vitamin deficiency, which could be the lowest possible level of crime. I mean, that's low. Okay? That's a warning level kind of thing. But they're going to put everything in there to make sure that something sticks somewhere along the way so that this individual is punished for what they did and that justice is served.
So just assault doesn't have a weapon?
Simple assault frequently does not have a weapon. It can be done with a fist. It can be a shoulder. It can be the knee. It can be an elbow. You can slip your elbow around somebody's neck, pull their head down, knee them in the midsection repeatedly until they can no longer breathe. There's just all kinds of ways, but that's assault. That's assault. But at a certain point, you have to let them go, too. Because the longer it goes on, the higher the elevation goes, until finally, if they die, it becomes murder. But here is a thing that, let me qualify when you say if it's a fist or it's a body part or you're just having a fight, what the rules are. If you are a trained fighter in some way, a boxer, a martial artist, a mixed martial artist, or some of the other martial arts, or sports that involve strong physical contact, everything gets elevated. Because you should know better not to use those skills on someone who is untrained or unable to defend themselves. You see that on TV, and that's a thing on TV, but what that actually is, if somebody says that in life, it's a warning. It's just a warning. There is no such thing as registering fists as a legal weapon. However, if someone has a boxing license or a mixed martial arts license in a particular state so that they can fight in matches in that state, they are in fact registered as a weapon. Okay?
So if you were registered in California, but you fought here, you still get in trouble?
Yes. Because the public is aware that that is true, and the officials in that state are aware. So yeah, it's a possibility. Depends on what individual state law says. Most states have some sort of an arrangement for individuals to take out licenses so they can have temporary rights to box in a certain state. Some states have permanent rights, like Nevada. When you get a Nevada state license for a boxing meet or a mixed martial arts fight, that lasts for a very long time. And, you know, there's some guys out there that are just, you know, they've had their licenses for years. Yes, Sheree.
So, if you like use our license as a weapon because you do martial arts or boxing or something, and somebody like attacks you, but that one hit just killed you, like what is that doing to you? Like what is that?
That's reckless. Here's what the law tells us. The common law tells us if we can walk away, we should. If we can talk our way out of it, we have to do that. If we can't walk away or talk our way out of it, we have to run away from it. Even if it makes us look bad, because the consequences of not walking away or not talking about it or not running away could be bad for us. Only if we are put into a corner where we cannot do anything except defend ourselves, then it becomes self-defense. And we had that question over here. Oh, yeah. So self-defense is one of the defenses to a crime, but you have to talk your way out of it, walk away out of it, run away from it, or whatever you need to do to get away from it. Okay? Yeah, go ahead.
So basically you're saying any action that falls into that category is basically you going to jail. Period.
Essentially.
So how come, like, in every like law person or person judge, they know this, right? So how come there are some people whose actions do fall into that, But they don't go to jail.
There are some mitigating circumstances, or there are some types of mental disorder. There's some sort of defense that enters into that. So it's a defense or a mitigating circumstance, which we will talk about those as
But what
we
if
go
there's
through this
evidence
section.
that falls?
Huh?
What if there's evidence that show that, you know, give that credibility?
Then there's something wrong with the process. There's something wrong with the process. Yeah.
So how do you feel about, if you had to assess the Trayvon Martin case, what would you say?
What would I say?
What would you say should have been?
Well, they have special laws, and we'll talk about stand your ground a little bit later. But since I wasn't there and I didn't witness it, I do have a personal opinion. It shouldn't have happened, okay? It should never have happened. But because the individuals that were involved should have been able to walk away and just say, okay, sorry, that's it, I'm sorry, I didn't want to. But it didn't happen that way. And so we just have to do our best, that's all. And the stand your ground, I do not support stand your ground as a self-defense because of the common law that I just expressed to Shri, where there was the incident outside the 7-Eleven where the guy was yelling at this woman about parking in a handicapped parking spot. And
I've seen that.
and her husband came out and pushed him away and then turned and disengaged. Now here's another thing. In any action where a perpetrator who could be defined as being an aggressor turns and walks away, the aggressor is no longer an aggressor and they have disengaged and you cannot take action against them. I do not, I know he shot him in the chest and I don't understand that because the guy turned away and then turned slightly back and was shot. But he was moving away from him. And how they can, I just don't understand how you can have a stand your ground law which does that kind of thing, that allows someone to be shot when the aggressor is moving away and shows that he is disengaging.
So, did he get convicted for sure?
No. No, they didn't even arrest him. They couldn't. The sheriff said he couldn't because of the stand your ground law. Yes, Ray.
Where is that?
Florida. It was in Florida.
I think that they're like down in the south, I don't know where, but they're trying to like, it's this law they're trying to start where you can basically have a gun and be able to do whatever, let out the possibility of like killing somebody, like.
You're talking about open carry?
Yeah.
Okay. There are two types of weapons permits for firearms. You have concealed carry and you have open carry. Some states have both. Some have one. Concealed carry is where in order to carry a firearm legally and not show it to the general public, you have to have a concealed carry permit. The state knows you are probably carrying a firearm. But because you have the concealed carry permit, it is concealed and you can continue to carry it. Other states now are trying to start what we call open carry. Open carry was defeated in Tennessee. Tennessee did not want to become like the Wild Wild West. So some states, though, are trying to put that into law where they can have open carry, which means somebody can walk down the street carrying an automatic rifle and nobody can do anything about it, even if they're afraid of that person. Okay? We're going to talk about some of the elements of crimes. Below these, we have our misdemeanors. There's misdemeanor assault, where somebody pushes somebody and they fall down. They might scrape their knees or their elbows. Bullying is now a misdemeanor crime. Battery is a misdemeanor crime, and you don't even have to injure someone for battery. They can just be afraid. They do something that they're afraid of, and they have what we call apprehension. And we'll differentiate between fear and apprehension. And then there's aggravated menacing, where somebody is very similar to bullying, where someone makes a threat or a threat which is considered serious, and they look like they're going to back it up, but then they back away. Now, the guy that was in Florida that was shot under the Stand Your Ground law might have been taken into custody for aggravated menacing or bullying, but it wouldn't have been anything else. At least here in Tennessee. Yeah.
So how do you feel about white flight when someone is calling the police on someone because they were, dangerous?
Okay. Let us be clear about this. There has been no legislation anywhere in this country that I know of against being stupid. And that's just plain stupid. Just calling the police on somebody because they look or they think they don't belong in a certain place or a certain area. That's just absolute. There's no limit on stupid. We have a hard time regulating that, you know? Okay. Let me talk about attempt and conspiracy also. Attempt and conspiracy take all of these crimes and say, well, they weren't committed, but they almost were. Attempted battery is when someone tries to hit someone. I come up and I try to hit somebody and I miss. I really didn't have good eyesight that night, and I just absolutely missed. My aim is off, way off. But I attempted to do it. That is where we get the term attempt. So when you hear attempted something, it means somebody was trying to create a criminal situation, but did not complete it. Okay? My neighbor comes running over and tries to steal the pink plastic flamingo out of my yard and makes a grab for it on the run and misses and keeps going. Well, that was an attempt to steal my flamingo. Oh, I actually have a neighbor that has two of them in the backyard of their garden. I've never tried to steal them. I have great sympathy for people that put pink plastic flamingos and garden gnomes in their gardens. My mother had garden gnomes in her garden, so we just leave that one alone. Okay. So attempt is when I keep doing that. Attempt is when you try to do one of these things and don't quite make it. Everything is completed except the last step, which is the finishing of the actus reus, or the finishing of the contact. Conspiracy is when you plan it out. There's three kinds of conspiracy: before, during, and after the fact. I'm going to use bank robbery to illustrate this. Okay. If you help with the planning, I'm going to say Zach helped with the planning. It would be conspiracy to commit bank robbery before the fact, because they haven't done it yet. You just helped plan it. Now, Abdurrahman here is the wheelman, and he's driving the car. And so he's committing conspiracy during the act, because he's driving the car. There's also conspiracy after the fact, in which Mecca hides everybody at her house after the thing's done. She makes them stay in the basement. So we have conspiracy before, conspiracy during, and conspiracy after the crime. Okay? Conspiracy and attempts are punishable by exactly the same penalty as the individual who actually carried out the crime. So if Jesse actually carried out the crime and went in and stole the money and ran out and dove into the car, the penalty that she gets is exactly the same penalty you get, and you get, and you get. Oh, now you're trying to get out of it, aren't you?
No, is it conspiracy and attempt, or is it just conspiracy?
You're going to be charged with all of those things. You're all going to be charged with everything. It's called a kitchen sink defense because of the old saying that they're throwing everything at you, even the kitchen sink.
So the driver too?
Oh, the driver too.
Because I was watching this other show and this man got murdered, life for murder, and he was just driving the car.
Oh yeah, it's the same penalty. The same penalty. That person is considered to be just as guilty of the murder as the people who actually pulled the trigger.
But what if he didn't, like, what if they called, like, somebody to pick them up, they didn't know what was
Yeah,
going on?
Okay, we haven't gotten to that part. We haven't gotten to that part yet, where we talk about, well, what if they didn't know? Or they did it because they were threatening their family. We haven't gotten to that yet, but we will. Okay. So far, you're all guilty. Okay? So far. All right. So, that's what attempt and conspiracy will do. And the prosecutor is going to charge everybody with everything and throw everything at somebody, including the kitchen sink. If there's a crime for stealing the kitchen sink, he'll throw that too. All right? So attempts are a positive movement toward the commission of the crime. You have the mens rea, which is the intent, and there's a partial completion of the act. The act is raised. It's partially done. Okay? So let's say Jesse walks into the bank, sees the guard and the people at the counter and drinks with them. And never robs the bank. Well, was there an attempt? Yeah, there's a positive movement because she went in the bank, she had the intent to do it, but didn't complete it. That's still an attempt. You're never going to watch TV again the same way. How many years can you get for attempt? At what, bank robbery?
Yeah, like that attempt.
26 years.
They ain't even robbed the bank yet.
So if you
They
still
ain't even steal nothing.
Depends on the state.
26.
Don't rob a bank in Nevada.
I wouldn't even.
And don't have a minor in the car when you rob the bank. Because that's life. Okay. But the act with attempt is not completed. So the bank robber hands the teller the note, demanding cash, but changes their mind and turns around and walks away before he takes possession of the money. That's still attempt. Okay? Conspiracy, sometimes we call that being an accessory before, during, and after the fact. TV is, all these shows, they like to call it accessory. I don't know why they don't use the right terms, but they do. They use accessory. So it's before, assisting in planning, during, driving the getaway car, and then after the fact, hides criminals or aids in their escape. The penalty for the attempt and conspiracy is the same as for the actual crime. Yeah.
What about saying bomb in the airport?
Bombing the airport.
What about saying bomb?
Saying bomb in the airport, that can be considered, because it's reckless, it's like yelling fire in a theater, that can be considered these days under federal law is a terroristic threat.
What about saying like, if you like this shit in the bomb?
It's like, what if you get like,
That's right.
Still a threat.
If you saying this shit in the bomb.
You cannot say.
I think that's.
You cannot say bomb in the airport.
Say it's good.
You have to be careful what you say, everywhere. Have to be careful what you say and where you say it, okay? White collar crimes, which are typical, are bribery, extortion, fraud, embezzlement, and computer crimes. What is bribery? See if I define it. Nope, I didn't define it, so I will define it for you. What is bribery? Everybody's heard about bribery on TV,
Oh, you
right?
talking about when they be giving the, what are them people? The college football players, when they like start giving them, taking care of their family, giving them cars, just so they can come play.
That's real close. That's not exactly a bribe, that's another kind of, that's an NCAA violation. But you're real close, you're on the right track there.
I think the CEO of Microsoft or something like that, he actually got caught for bribery. And I don't know the exact situation, but.
We're getting close. I'll move my way across.
would it be like those, passes on those late night BET commercials that's trying to sell like the living spring water and make it seem that you're gonna have money, you can get anointed, and it really don't do nothing.
That's more fraud than bribery.
Bribery is like paying authority. So
Paying an authority. Explain the term authority.
authority, maybe like a police officer, like a judge. To stop the judgment.
In interaction with an official, when they're doing their duty, you offer them something of value. That would be bribery. The one key is they are an official. The second key is you're offering them something of value to get yourself out of something that's a very unpleasant situation. Okay?
Like, it's
That is bribery.
so would it be changed to blackmail if, they like do something against them for them not to, for them to.
We're gonna get to that. That just flips everything around.
Okay, I'm just making
Okay.
sure it is split.
So bribery is when an official receives something of value, you give them something of value to get out of something that you find unpleasant. Sometimes you will hear that a witness was bribed during a trial. A witness or a juror is sworn in and becomes an official for the state. So anytime someone attempts to affect an outcome by giving a juror something of value or tampering with the jury, you've heard that term? That can be, under certain circumstances, bribery. Extortion. This is what Sri was talking about. Extortion is blackmail. Extortion is when you threaten someone with consequences unless they pay you. So if I threaten a shopkeeper that I'm going to come in and break up his store unless he pays me $500 a week, that is extortion. That's the basic idea behind extortion. Okay? Yes?
Does extortion always have to have like money behind it?
Not always money. It can be something, but it has to be of value to the individual who is making the directive to the individual who is being extorted. Something of value, whether it's legal value, be it money, or be it an exchange of promises, or something like that. Fraud. We were talking about fraud a little earlier, and I said, oh, that's more closely related to fraud. fraud, would you like to go over fraud again? No, come on. Tell me what you said.
It was like, I've seen so many commercials where like preachers, they say, if you buy this water, if you buy this oil, you're gonna be paid all this money and you're gonna be healed. There's like literally people, they have people who like come up and act like, testimony about it.
Okay, now, do you suppose that this individual knew that that wasn't true?
Yes, I do.
Okay, that would be fraud. If the individual promises somebody something in exchange for something of value and knows that whatever he's giving them is not correctly represented, and he does it intentionally, that is fraud. Yes, sir.
So, when it's like, if a commercial does that, what does that do to them? Like, does it shut down the whole business, or does it just?
We're talking about consumer fraud. And consumer fraud, we will talk about when we talk about torts and negligence and consumer law. But fraud is fraud. The person, if they know about it, for example, I go into a store and I'm going to buy an exercise bicycle. And this actually happened. Not to me, but this actually happened in a situation. And the salesperson says, this is the best exercise bicycle on the market. I will sell it to you, and it will do this, 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 and this, and you'll lose a pound a day for the next 6 weeks. And you'll be real strong. But they know that that's not how it works. That's not how weight loss works. You have to eat right and exercise. And the person gets on the bicycle, and not only is the bicycle not doing the job, but it breaks and injures them. Then we have a tort for which they can sue, plus they have fraud because the salesman knew it wasn't going to do what he said. So that's consumer fraud. Fraud oftentimes is, now we have a lot of internet fraud, don't we? Yeah, everybody had some fraud on the internet. Give me an example of fraud on the internet. Credit card scams. They call you up and they say, you can reduce your credit card. In fact, I had one today. You can reduce your credit cards by so much % right now. If you call us right now, and then they expect you to pay them for reducing your credit cards, that would be a real good trick with me. I don't have any credit cards. I always pay with cash or by check. So I know they're automatically scams and fraud, right? But we all have to be very wary that these things are out there. Yes?
How about when you get a call on the phone saying your vehicle warranty is about to end, like my car has been paid for, why are you still calling me? I don't know.
Vehicle warranties. Occasionally, even if you get a brand new car, that somebody will get a hold of the data on the registration from your car and they will start sending you extra protection insurance policies. Oh, look out for those guys.
I always wondered why I went to those calls.
There's firms, I get them out of Texas and Florida, and they come and they send me this and they say, we think that you need to extend your warranty on your car because your engine is going to blow up in about 6,000 miles. And I'm like, my car's electric. It doesn't have that kind of an engine. Rip. Right in the recycling. I mean, you can actually almost smell them when they come in from the mailbox, you know. They smell like fraud. Fraud smells real funny. And if it smells funny, the smell test. If it smells like something that's too good to be true, it is. Right? All right. Grandma always said that. What's embezzlement?
Taking money from the company.
Yeah. What's it? Abdul, what's an easy example of embezzlement?
Taking the public fund for personal use.
Public funds. Let's say you work for the clerk of courts, and the clerk of courts decides that he's going to charge every couple that comes in $75 to marry them, when it's free. You marry them, they pay the fee for the license, but he's charging them $75, and then it doesn't go into the public till to reduce taxes or to pay for the expenses of the office. But he comes out at night and he said, well, I had 4 weddings today, I'm going to take $300. And he takes it out, puts it in his wallet, and walks away. That is embezzlement. It's frequently the ones we hear about are public officials, but it doesn't have to be. It can be any business, anywhere that's involved, or any government agency that handles money, or a bank. Okay? Computer crimes. Oh, we've got all kinds of computer crimes these days, don't we? Oh, we've got the fraud crimes. We found this guy over in London that's left you a fortune of 14 million euros, and we need your bank information, your name, your address, and your password in order to deposit the money into your bank account. That is a computer crime because it came through the email.
Well, it sounds too good to be true.
You know, yeah, the too good to be true thing. And there are other ones too. The pop-ups, you have pop-ups that come up on the computer, or there are ads that look too good to be true, and they come on and they say, click on this link and we'll give you free services to examine your computer for viruses and that sort of thing. That's a computer crime because they've downloaded software onto your computer, then use your computer as part of a botnet. You heard of a botnet? Where a lot of computers work together to do what we call denial of service activities on specific sites like U.S. government services or something like that. That's how a lot of other types of fraud and different things can be executed is by using a botnet. Forgery. What is forgery? Larry.
Putting your name on a grade you give me, and I forge your signature.
You put my signature on something, and I don't say, yeah, that's my signature, and back you up, it's forgery. People, that's like, well, I'm going to talk about check kiting in a minute. Yeah.
All right, I have a specific question, so.
Okay, so you know this guy.
No.
No, you don't say that.
No, it's not.
No. Say it's out.
All right, I know my manager for me, like, he just got insurance, car insurance. But he put an accident that was not his fault.
Mhm.
But they actually checked it. You're at fault. Is that fine?
It depends.
I don't think so. I think
It may have been, if the police report backs you up, then there's not a problem. Did you make a report? Because you're supposed to report, in Tennessee, you're supposed to report 1 to the police and 2 to the insurance agency. And they send you forms and you actually draw out what happened and make a little sketch on it.
my friend didn't do any of that.
He didn't do any of
I
that.
think they're just going back.
Okay, so it's going to be his word against their word.
Or they'll just let it slide, maybe.
We'll see. Yeah, Jillian.
I know how to do that in your insurance restrictions, or they just get a record to
Say that again?
I know they must do that if you get a record to or
If you are in an accident in Tennessee, you have to report it to your insurance company within, say, 48 hours. A lot of states are like that now. Ohio's like that, too. West Virginia's like that. Kentucky's like that. You have to report it to your insurance company. And they send you the forms, and you attach the police report, and you draw the little diagram of what happened, and you write it out in words, and you keep a copy. Always keep copies. or take pictures of it with your phone and keep it. Okay? Now, forgery is when somebody else signs my signature. All right? That's forgery. Defalcation. Defalcation is a complicated crime. It involves trusts and estates. First of all, what is an estate?
Land.
Pardon me, Larry?
What'd you say, estate?
What is an estate?
All the assets belong to a person's like name.
A named person who is generally deceased. Estates can also be all the assets of a person who is not deceased, but who has had their assets put into a trust in order to ensure their safety. Now, defalcation is when somebody goes in, breaks that trust, and steals the assets. That is defalcation. It's the theft of trust or estate assets. So if a person steals estate assets, they can be charged with grand theft, defalcation, simple theft, and like I said, the prosecutor is going to find a dozen other things to throw at them. Okay. False token. Well, let's do false entries. False entries. What are false entries?
Example, putting in numbers that the company did not see or know about, and you enter a false entry.
Exactly correct. False entries are when accounting numbers are put into a ledger that the company does not know about, and they are incorrect for that particular day. Any question on that? That one is one of the easier ones. False token. False token.